Good morning, everybody. We want to welcome you to today's webinar, and a topic that I'm personally super excited about is just reporting within Lightspeed. And even more specifically, how do you take all that reporting and analytics and actually help you make business-driven decisions? So really something I think that everybody wants to get out of their dealer management system. And with Lightspeed, we've got many ways to help you and support you to do that. Now, I know many of you have been on webinars before, but just a quick reminder, there's a Q&A little chat button at the bottom of your screen. Anytime throughout the webinar, just ask questions. We're going to answer those as we go. We've got Quinton on today as a panelist to help address questions, and then we're going to allow time at the end too to just really address even more of the specific questions that you ask. And we will have today's webinar recorded and available on demand on our website. You'll also see it out on our YouTube channel too in a couple of days. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to today's presenter, Brian Tierney.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, folks, for joining us today for another Wednesday webinar. I know many of you are excited to learn a little bit about custom reporting and reporting in general in Lightspeed. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Brian Tierney. I'll be acting as the software solutions consultant for today's meeting. By title, I'm the sales engineer here with Lightspeed, and I come to you with a little over 30 years Lightspeed experience, both in the dealership environment and also here at the Lightspeed organization. Lots of time using Lightspeed, lots of time running and handling reports. So today I'm going to take some of that experience that I've gleaned over those years and provide it to you in a very quick and easy to digest format. And we'll take a look at all those different elements inside of Lightspeed. So again, thanks for taking some time. Thanks for joining us today. Found a little quote online that I thought was useful for today's demonstration that really speaks to kind of the heart of what we're trying to achieve here with reporting tools. All the little ones and zeros and little bits of data that exist inside of your system. All of that stuff is great and it's fun to look at, but it's not very useful unless it becomes information that can impact your business in ways to create efficiency and ultimately more profit, more success for your staff and for your business. And we're going to show you some ways that we take all those little ones and zeros, all those little data bits, and create some useful information out of it. But not only that, how do we enact on that information? How do we use that information to move forward to make something that we can gain from? So let's take a look at that together. Our agenda is we're going to talk about the different report types in Lightspeed. And in my mind, there's two main report types. And that doesn't really tell the whole story because there's quite a bit more than that. But we'll introduce the two main report types and offer a little bit of insight into those. Then we'll show you a little bit of reporting navigation, and that's going to be useful as we start to talk about custom report design. We'll kind of interchange those and show you a real-world example of how do we find a report, and once we find it, what do we do with it if we need to modify it? So we'll give you some examples. Then we're going to show you some of my top 5 favorite reports in the system, Tierney's top 5 favorites, and these are reports that I've had lots of questions over the years about from people internally and also some from some of my clients as well, so I'll feature those. Then I'm going to show you some other tools that maybe you haven't even considered before when it comes to reporting. Yes, they are reporting tools, but they don't tend to fall in line with your typical reporting menus. I'll show you what those are and why they matter. Then we'll show you some things to kind of connect with us, some ways to connect with Lightspeed, our social media, our YouTube channel, and we'll offer some final remarks. And of course, we'll take some questions at the end of the webinar. So once again, thanks for being here, folks. Well, let's talk about the reporting types in Lightspeed. This is where we're going to start our journey. And as I mentioned, there's two main reporting types. We've got reports and custom reports. Well, that sounds a little redundant, doesn't it? There's two different places in each of the different departments, each of the modules that have the word report in it. And sometimes looking at those two things kind of creates a little bit of confusion. And so what I hope to do today is to delineate between the two, show that they're both useful, but explain what they are and give you some examples of what they are in the system to hopefully make you find the reporting data you're looking for a little easier. So let's take a look at those in the system. First, reports, your standard reports. What are those? What is a custom report? Why are they different? Let's take a look and see what they look like together in Lightspeed. So I'm going to go back into the system. And for those of you that are familiar with Lightspeed, you already know this. In each of your departments, parts, service, sales, even in the accounting modules, you have a report selection and you have a custom report selection. And this is where that confusion sometimes comes in, that redundancy. Well, they're both reports. Why is there two different selections? Well, the concept is this. If I go into, let's take payables, for example, and reports, and maybe I'm going to select aging report. If I'm selecting something from one of the reports or standard reports menu, I come into a kind of a dashboard experience where I have a series of drop-down menus I can select from to pull the exact data, to glean the data that I'm looking for. And once I've made those selections from the drop-down menus, I click the report button and Lightspeed responds with giving me the information I'm looking for. Now, if I wanted to change the formatting or if I wanted to change the layout of the report, the limitations of reports in the reporting menu prevent me from being able to change the layout. I can't move columns around or I can't change the configuration of the report, with the exception of changing from the drop-down menus my selections. I do have that ability, but I can't change the basic format. Another example might be in General Ledger, since we're talking accounting. If I go into my profit and loss statement, I have a series of drop-down menus I can select from to pick a particular month, maybe a format type, maybe a fiscal year. Once I've made my selections, I can then hit the Generate Report button and I get the information. Very simple, right to the point, powerful information. But what makes this different than a custom report is a custom report lets me interact with this data in a more customizable way, hence the word custom. So let's take a look. I'm going to go into System. We're going to drop right down into All Custom Reports. So some of you may not know that this list exists here. This is where every single custom report in your system, regardless of module, lives. And if I go into this report list, then I can select a report from the screen. And the difference is when I make that selection for the report, I can then run it. I can enter dates. But if I don't like the formatting for the report, I can make some adjustments to it and customize that experience. Now, I'm going to pause here because we're going to go through a little bit of what that customization and the review of the reporting data looks like, but I just wanted to make folks aware of the two different reporting types at a basic level. Well, let's do a little bit of a kind of a role play here. We're going to talk reporting navigation, which will lead us into some report design, which I think probably most of you are here to see today. Now, the reporting navigation example that I'm going to talk about is we're going to show you some ways to find the reporting data in the system, and I'm going to use some of the tips and tricks that I'm going to teach you about here to then find a report in a real-time scenario and then take that reporting data and design it a little bit. So why does reporting navigation matter, and why am I really including this and highlighting this in the webinar? And the reason is this. Throughout my tenure here with Lightspeed, I'm often asked questions internally or even from my clients that say, Brian, I need you to build me a report. Can you build this for me? And my response often to them is, well, have you looked in the system to see if you could find that report? Because chances are it's already there. That's a tip for you guys and gals. And the answer that I usually get from that person is, no, I haven't even looked. I don't even know where to look. So right now, what my goal is today is to provide you a little bit of instruction for you to go search for a report should you need one. And I'm going to empower you with some of those tools. So let's do that together. Let's go back into Lightspeed here. And I'm going to go right into, let's go into parts. We have already been into accounting. We're going to go into a few different areas of the program today, but I'm going to go into parts and custom reports, and I'm going to go into parts inventory. We'll just use this as our guinea pig, for example. Let's pretend like I don't know what I'm looking at. Let's give you some field definitions and some ideas to consider as you're now navigating the report. So I'm going to kind of describe. What we see over on the left, this LS column, and I see a series of padlock icons. Those are indications of reports that came with your system, and they're also locked down to prevent you from duplicating or modifying the original version of the report to maintain the original design integrity and connect it to the original design of the program. There's some reasons why we do that. Now, you'll also notice there's a column that lists items that potentially could be chartable. There's a dot present if it's chartable, and what that means is I can review the data in a graphic image like a pie chart or a bar graph. If there's no dot present, that is only available to me in a black and white text format. Number gives me a reference or a search point that is actually tied right into the title, so the number shows up along with the title. And if I'm searching for a report, I might be searching by number or by title or a combination of the things. Title gives me a little bit of a high-level overview of what sort of information exists in that report. Category tells me what bucket does it fall in. Is it parts? Is it service? Is it accounts payable? When did we last run it? What is the recommended run interval? Should we run it weekly, daily, monthly? How often should I run this report if I'm trying to build a workflow for me or for my managers? What person in the business should be running this report? Is it a manager? Is it a parts inventory specialist? Or is this my payroll specialist that should be running this report? How often do we run it and last time it was created? Now, most importantly, I think in terms of trying to find the report that I'm looking for, I think title is a big key here. But at the very bottom of the screen is a description field where it gives me some information about what details are contained on that report. And that is searchable. We're about to find out in a moment. But it's a great reference if I'm just curious. Rather than running 10 or 20 reports at a time, I can highlight a report, review the description, and without having to run it, I have a pretty good idea of what data I can glean from that. Now, in the bottom center is a report sample. Now, I often get folks that are looking at this screen with me, and they'll look at this sample at the bottom, and they'll say, I can see them puzzled, they're scratching their head, and they say, you know what? That information doesn't look right. So I just want everybody to know as they're looking at this screen, that sample data is not your data. It's just purely a reference to give you an idea of what the format structure of the report's going to look like. So if you're looking at this at the bottom of your report screen and you're saying to yourself, gosh, those numbers are a little wonky. Yes, they are, and they're wonky on purpose because this is just sample information. So until you run the report, which we're about to do together, you're not actually going to see the data. So just to be clear on that, I often get that confusion. So let's take a look. Going back to report navigation, one of the things that I think about whenever I'm searching for a report, and I'm going to go back to that example that I provided a moment ago. Somebody comes to me and says, Brian, I need you to build a report. And my response to them is, well, have you looked for it yet? And they say to me, no, I don't even know where to start. We're going to do this together. So let's go back into Lightspeed. And I want to point out there's three main pieces that I would consider when I'm looking at this screen. But before we ever get to the screen, I want you to consider what it is you're looking for. So let's close this screen together. We're just looking at the login screen for the program and going back to the question. Person walks up to me and says, Brian, I need you to build me a parts inventory report, but I need it grouped by supplier. And I would say, sure, absolutely. But have you looked for that report yet? And they might say, no, I don't even know where to start. All right, so here's where we begin. What kind of report is this? Well, we know it's a parts because the parts person or whoever walked up to me said, I need a parts inventory report. So I know I'm going to start in parts. Let's go to parts. I'm going to come down to custom reports because the person said I need a report, so I can just assume it's a custom report. Or they may have come to me and said I need a list of something. Tie the word list to reports in this context. When I select custom reports, then I see a series of selections. Is this invoice related? Is it supplier related? Is it a miscellaneous item? What is it that I'm looking for? Well, the person said I need parts inventory by supplier. Well, that's pretty simple. I'm going to select parts inventory. I think we're on the right track now to find that report. But here's where things go a little haywire. They come into a list that looks like this and they see, oh my gosh, on my screen, there's 30 different reports. I don't know which one to pick. In some lists, there might be 100, there might be 200, and that's a lot of reports to sift through, especially when the phone's ringing. I've got a customer in front of me. There's a lot of chaos going on in the dealership. Ain't nobody got time to look through all of these reports. So we're going to show you some shortcuts. First of all, we already talked about the report title that gives me a little bit of a sense of what information is contained in the report. Description expands on that thought, gives me more detail. You may or not have noticed there's a search field on the upper left corner of the screen, and that's going to be key in helping you quickly and efficiently find the reports you're looking for. So let's employ this. Going back to the conversation from the person asking me for the report, Brian, can you build me a supplier report? Well, let's go search for it. So what did he ask or she ask? Report, parts, supplier. I'm going to take one of those keywords from that request and add that to my search field. Now you'll notice as soon as I start adding that information, the screen is reacting. It's responding based on what I'm searching for. And it's reducing the list from what was there a moment ago to things that match based on the search criteria I'm entering. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a question or a statement. It can be one word. And I chose the word supplier because that's key for what this person's looking for. And it's looking for the word supplier in the title of the report. It might also look in category or roles, but it's also looking in the description. You'll notice in the description, supplier is highlighted in yellow. So it found the word supplier and it gave me a few results that should give me the information I'm looking for. Now that my list is reduced, it's a little less chaotic for me to sift through. And I go back to the question, what is it you're after? Well, I'm looking for parts inventory by supplier. Well, this 505 report looks like it could meet that criteria. But also the one below it seems to have a similar description. And the word filter by supplier means this information is looking at a very specific supplier where the report above it is showing me all suppliers. Now, this particular individual is asking for one, so I think this is the report they're after. Let's run it. And I run it by either double-clicking on that field or pressing the Run button in the upper right corner of the screen. Let's do one of either of those. Then I get my custom report run wizard where I have a series of predetermined boxes. This is really to your discretion. When you run the report or print it, do you want these details on the report? Things like the name of your store, filter criteria, or the page number of the report. I'm going to leave them all on there. Click the next button. Enter a supplier code. Now with these filters, and filter means I'm looking for something very specific. I'm going to use a filter to drill into the detail. They're also case sensitive. So if you're using a supplier code that uses capital letters, make sure that you put capital letters into that search field. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get any results. So keep that in mind. Pro tip. I enter WP for Western Power Sports, and I'm going to hit the next button. I'm going to preview this order on my screen. So I'm going to leave the checkbox checked to preview, click the finish button, and the reporting result will now come up on my screen so I can review the data. Now, going back to the question I had from the individual who says, I need a parts report showing parts by supplier. Of course, I'm probably going to ask him, well, which supplier is it? And he gave me the answer, Western Power. Now I've got the report sitting there in front of me. And maybe I print this off. I hand him the print copy or her the print copy. She or he is reviewing it and says, yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Thank you. However, I notice there's a problem on this report. Well, what's that? The first part number on this report shows a -1 in stock. What's going on with that? That's a problem. We never want to have negative quantities in stock. First of all, what I'd like to do is go check the box where those acorn nuts live, and I want to make sure that there are either 0 in stock or maybe there's a positive quantity, but I have no idea where it is. Can you get me a bin location for that part? Well, as we all know, I can go to that parts inventory record and see the bin location in inventory, but better yet, what if I were able to add bin location to this report, hand that person the report, and then they can go check themselves? Let's do that together, which is now going to give us an opportunity to talk about report design. So what we're going to do next is take that report that we were able to answer the question who was looking for that part by supplier. We got the question answered, but another question came up, and that's often the case when it comes to reporting, right? So now we're going to take that report, make some adjustments to it based on the very specific scenario, and then we're going to give the user that information, and they're going to go and make some actions out of it. So let's put that together. I'm going to walk you through the report designer, point out the different elements of it, and then we'll answer the question of bin location for our person. So let's go back into Lightspeed. So first of all, I'm back on that custom reports list. I've got the report highlighted. I'm going to modify this report, but all of a sudden Lightspeed's going to say, wait a minute, Brian, you can't modify a system report or a standard issue report. And back to the idea that it's padlocked, preventing me from messing up the original design, I can create a duplicate. So when I press the modify button, Lightspeed says, do you want me to duplicate this? Yeah, let's duplicate it. Duplicate. I can give it a new name. It's going to give me a default name with the word copy at the end of it, the original name plus copy, but I'm going to change this. I'm going to say with bin location and leave the rest of the name alone. Click OK. So now we've renamed our modified or redesigned version of the report. It's thinking for just a moment, and it's going to now take us to the report designer. So many of you have seen this before. Some of you may not have. Let's give you a little bit of a walk around the room. First of all, on the left side of the screen is all of the different informational fields that exist in parts inventory. And that's important to know. We're looking at a very specific data set. If I wanted to report off of an AP invoice or a major unit record, that doesn't exist in parts inventory. So don't even bother looking there. You're not going to find it. But if it's parts inventory I'm looking for, the concept here is these are all the informational details. Part number, description, cost, bin location, all the things we care about for parts. But if I'm looking for boats or motorcycles, I'm not going to find it here. So just so you know, I will find it in other places in the system. And what I'm teaching you here applies to every other aspect of the system. Okay. Now, in the center top side of the screen is the layout. This is what we saw when we ran that report a moment ago. And there's a couple of important things to know about. Each of the columns that are present on that report are identified here, like part number, supplier, category, and description. And then above those columns is this little light yellow field. It's kind of hard to see sometimes. So notice that yellow field. What that's representing is the width of your page. Now, one important element of the report design is at the bottom left corner of the screen is a properties button. If I press that button, I have a page setup option where I can pick between portrait and landscape. Now, if I select landscape, you may be able to notice that that yellow stripe across the top of my columns just expanded. It's longer now. My page has now landed sideways on the screen. I have a little more real estate to work with, but also when I print it, I'm using landscape versus portrait. So keep that in mind, but it does give you more width for your columns. For our purposes today, we're going to leave it alone with our original portrait design. I'm going to set it back to where we were before. Also notice the little lines between the columns. Should I need to expand the width of a column, I can simply grab one of those lines with my cursor, click and drag, and move those columns around to change the width of the columns if I just need to move things around. Or I can also click and drag columns if I want to reposition something. In addition to changing the width of columns or repositioning columns, I can also rename columns by clicking into the bold font text and replacing what's there with something different, with something that maybe meets the criteria that I'm trying to define a little more closely. And I've just abbreviated supplier and category for the context of our reporting tool. Bottom center is where our filters live. And think of filters as ways to drill into the very specific nuance that I'm looking for, in this case, supplier code. Now, what's funny about filters in this context is right now I've already got 2 lines for filters, which is saying I want to see inventory quantities that are not equal to 0. In other words, positive or negative quantities. If it's 0 on hand, I don't want to see it on this report. And I'm looking for a very specific supplier code, which is equal to prompt me to fill in the blank when I run the report. Now, this little blue, what looks like a funnel, it actually is a funnel. If I hover my mouse over that little blue funnel, I can add additional filters. The add a filter description shows up. I click that, and I can add an additional filter. For our context today, the filter we want to add is bin location. So I double click in the definition box, search for the description or the words bin, and I've got 3 potentials to select from. I'm going to select bin 1 for our example today, drop it into the filter criteria and say is equal to prompt, and I want it to say I'm looking for a particular filter. Okay. Now over on the right side, in the bottom right, is a grouping, and grouping allows me to bucket like criteria together. In this case, the group that exists in this report right now is supplier name. But if I wanted to group by category, for example, too, let's add another group to my list. And what I would end up doing there is maybe I categorize my parts as chemicals, tires, clothing, spark plugs. Not only do I want my report data to be grouped by supplier, but I also want it to be grouped and subtotaled by criteria like categories. Put all my spark plugs together, put all my oil filters together, put all my t-shirts together. Category grouping is a way to do that. For now, I'm going to remove that just from our list. So back to the story, we need to add bin location to the layout because when I run this report, I need to see where that part's listed so I can go find it in my inventory. So I'm going to hit the search field at the very top of the definition side, the left side of my report designer. And just like we searched for a filter description, I'm going to search for the word bin, which reduces the items on my contents page on the left to just things that match my search. I do find bin location incidentally, and I double click and drop it into the layout, which is what's going to show up on the print or the preview version of the report. Now, one thing to note is when I added bin location to the layout, notice that the top of that column is a slightly different color than the other colors across the other columns. That's an indication to me that bin location is hanging off the edge of the page. In other words, if I preview or print this report, I'm not going to see that column because it's too wide for the report. So I have a couple of options. One is I can go back to the properties button and select landscape versus portrait, or I can condense the columns into smaller widths. And let's do that together today. So I'm just going to grab the part number column and squish it down just a little bit. Do the same thing to supplier and do the same thing to category, because I know the values that show up in those columns are not very wide, so they don't occupy much real estate. I think I can make that work. I'm going to do the same thing with on hand and available, each cost and extended cost. So I'm really just squishing down these columns so I can get a little more real estate for bin location to fit on the page. Well, bin, as you can see, still doesn't quite fit. In fact, I'm going to scoot it over next to part number. Well, now my column changed, but something else is not fitting on the report. Let's squash, squash, squash. I'm just going to change this to bin. And I think we're now fitting on the page. As we can see, the tops of each of these columns are all the same color. That means green light is go. I think we're in good shape. So part number, bin location, supplier, we have everything we need. Let's go ahead and save this report design. And just to reaffirm, properties button shows the title of the report. We added the with bin location to the title. I'm going to go ahead and say that looks great to me. Okay, and save. Now that I've saved this report, maybe it's time that I preview it and make sure that it does what I need it to do. So I go ahead and run the report from this screen. Next, and I'm going to add some filters. Well, we're going to look for Western Power once again, and I'm going to say, you know what, I don't care about the specific bin location. I'm going to ignore that filter for now. Click the next button, preview the report on the screen right from the designer, and we're going to see if we had some success. We're going to see if this answers the question that our person had, and I think it does, because as I look at the report now, I have a bin location column, and it shows that this part number in question that has a -1 in on-hand quantity sits in bin location A22. So I'm going to go ahead and print this off. I give it to my person. They go look in the bin to verify quantities. And if they find there's a problem, now we can take action on that problem and adjust the inventory accordingly. So I hope this example kind of gave you some ideas of how to search for a report, but also how to design and adjust reports should you need to do those kinds of things. And of course, there's a lot more to report design. But given the nature of the webinar and the time we have today, that's about all I have to cover in designing. But let's talk about some other reporting elements today. Let's talk about my top 5 reports. Tierney's top 5. Kind of funny. But anyway, we're going to talk about the top 5 reports that I get the most questions on, whether I'm in a webinar, whether I'm in a consultation type of a conversation, whether I'm talking to somebody internal at Lightspeed. They're generally asking about one of these 5 reports, and they're in no specific order. It's not to say that the top selling parts report's my favorite. In fact, if you ask me, my personal preference is the customer retention report's my favorite, but I didn't say that. So let's talk about what these reports are, not only where they live in the system and what they do, but how can we take action using the data that they provide. So let's go back into Lightspeed. We're going to look at top selling parts. We're going to look at technician statistics. We're going to look at our major unit aging report. We're going to talk daily operating control, and I'm going to plug the mobile application into that. We're going to talk about customer retention and taking action using the data that those reports provide. So let's take a look. We go back to Lightspeed here, and I'm going to start with the top selling parts, which of course lives in the parts module because it's a parts report. This happens to be in our standard issue reports. This is one of those non-custom reports. So I select reports. I come down to top selling parts. Now, in the interest of time, there's a little bit of configuration we can apply to this report. I'm going to keep it really straightforward and simple and say, hey, Lightspeed, since September 1st through today, show me my top 10 selling parts over the parts counter. I could say, show me a series of part numbers, maybe ranging from 1 to 20. Or I could say, show me my spark plug sales, the category for spark plugs, or show me my supplier from Winnebago. Show me those parts. But again, for today, we're just going to look at my total inventory, my top 10 selling parts for the month of September, and I generate the report. And on this report, I can see what my top selling part is. Well, we sell a lot of this fan belt, 46 of these to be exact, and I can see how much money we've made in the process. And as I look down through my top 10s, I see how many I've sold, and I also see what kind of money and margins I'm making on those sales. Now, in terms of taking action on this report, it's great information to look at. It's kind of fun. But what can I do with it? Well, I can contribute this to my order screen. I can make sure that I've got enough of these on hand. If I'm selling a lot of these, I want to make sure that I reorder them. Now, another subject that relates to this that we've talked about in past webinars and one of our parts inventory webinars, and we've got a future one coming up soon too. We've talked about the buying guide that lives on the ordering screen. This is going to help to contribute to that buying guide experience, but it's a great place to go just to see what my top sellers are and to make sure that we keep those on hand because they're important, obviously, because we're selling a lot of them. Let's talk about the next in my top 5 list, which is in service. This is our technician statistics report. So if I go down to reports, another one of those standard issue reports, and select technician statistics, lots of powerful information can be gleaned from this. Many of our service departments use this for payroll. Many of our service departments use this for coaching opportunities, for ways to provide benefits and incentives for technicians, or it's just a way really to find out who's looking at Facebook all day long and who's actually turning wrenches. I promise you'll find out who's doing that using this data. So let's look at the detailed version of this report, and I'm going to pinpoint the 15th and the 16th of this month, okay? Then we're going to pinpoint an individual. We're going to pick on poor Amber today. So she's our guinea pig for today's test subject. And we're going to say that she works 16 hours, so 8 hours a day between those 2 days. I want to see the detail related to her, what she did, and I generate the report. Now, it is important to note that I put her hours, these are boots on the ground hours associated to her name during that time frame. What does that mean? Well, I may be using the time clock in Lightspeed where I press the F12 button, clock in and out of the system, or I may be using a punch clock on the wall, but either way, those are the hours that we're documenting that Amber was physically on the premises. So that's important to know as I'm running this report. Then I hit the generate button. Let's expand the view just a little bit. And I see all the detail assignments associated to Amber. I see all of the labor line descriptions, labor rates assigned to those labor lines, build hours. Think of this as the retail side of labor, what the customer saw in their service ticket. Credited, which is kind of a copy and paste of build hours. It's behind the scenes. It's a tool that we can use to measure for payroll. But we can also adjust for incentivizing technicians or penalizing for that matter. And then actual hours, if your staff is using the mobile application to clock in and out of jobs, or if they're clocking in and out from the desktop, we're recording how long it actually took them to perform those tasks. Then line by line, we can get some efficiency ratings comparing build hours to actual hours. And ultimately at the bottom, we see a subtotal for those values. Total build hours, total actual hours, and we can see Amber is a rock star with a little over 100% efficiencies. That's pretty cool. If you've got technicians doing that, make sure you're taking care of them. Now, the other element here is now if we measure the 16 hours that Amber was physically on the premises, we can compare build hours and actual hours to those hours. The 16 hours that Amber was here, during those 16, she billed 12.35 hours, which gives her a proficiency rating of 77%. Not bad, not bad. Because Amber's got other things to do, like sweep out her bay. She's got to go deliver maybe items to the parts department or vice versa. So she can't be working all the time on jobs, maybe. We'll just give her the benefit of the doubt. Now, in terms of actual hours, when she was actually clocked into those jobs compared to boots on the ground hours, we see that she's 76% productive. So we can see those numbers as it relates to her boots on the ground hours, build and actual hours. And again, we can use this for payroll. We can use it for coaching opportunities. We can use it to make sure that our staff is doing what they're supposed to be doing instead of social media or playing on their phone. So just things to think about, things to consider. Great information here. Well, let's talk about another report. We're going to go over to the sales side of the business, and we're going to go right into custom reports this time and major unit inventory. Now, when it comes to major unit inventory, the one that I kind of focus in on and look at frequently is our 710 aging report, which can be run two ways. You can run it as a graphic image, which will show kind of a pie chart of what your inventory looks like, and each make is listed there, age of the vehicle is listed there as a wedge in the pie. For our purposes today, we're going to look at the detail, and I'm going to run this and just give you a sense of what information can be gleaned and why this is important. And then we're going to take action on this report as well. So what this report's designed to do is to show you by make, by brand, what vehicles are in your inventory and how long have they been there. Now, this is important as you've got vehicles that are starting to move towards 60 days, 90 days. Now, in my environment, not a lot of sales is happening in Lightspeed sample environments. So we've got some old inventory here, hence these ages on the far right side of the screen, 305 days old, 128 days old. I hope you don't have inventory in your system that old, but if you do, let's take action. So now that we've determined we've got some old stuff sitting on the showroom floor, we got to move it, because as long as this thing's sitting here, basically we're losing money as those units sit there. So let's make action. Let's take action. And I'm going to go over to the sales inventory side, so major unit inventory. And I'm going to really drill into a very specific unit to highlight one of the features that you may or may not know exists inside of Lightspeed. And I'm going to pick on this Harley Davidson. It's a used bike. It's been sitting on our floor for a little more than a year. We've had a lot of bites on it. We've even provided some quotes, but just can't seem to move it. You've probably got some of those. You probably experienced that. Well, if I've got a unit that I can't sell, or I don't want to take more loss on it, what I can do from Lightspeed is I can go to my value guide button. At the very bottom left side of the screen is a consign to NPA button, where I happen to know, before I show you this, I happen to know that I'm into this unit $8,800. That's my flooring, my cost, my trade value. That's what I own it for. But if I go to my value guide and I press consign to NPA, I can say, hey, National Power Sport Auction, I need to get $8,800 for this unit. Can you sell it for me? They're going to send a truck to your store. Now, you will have to pay for delivery and shipping, and I've heard values anywhere from $250 to $500. Reach out to NPA for more quotes on that. But you tell them you need your $8,800. This unit is not salvaged, it's not wrecked. Maybe you add some notes about it. It's really fast. It's got some flames on the tank. Whatever you want to put. Say decline the battery service, submit to NPA. NPA sends a truck. They take it to their auction site, and eventually you get paid your $8,800 for a vehicle that just wasn't selling on your showroom floor. Taking action on obsolete inventory, old inventory in your sales department. Let's talk about another report. We're going to go to accounting this time, and I'm going to go to general ledger, come down to reports, and I'm going to go to DOC report, which is an acronym for daily operating control report. Let's show you what this looks like. I'm going to show you from two different perspectives. First of all, you can look at a monthly view, a daily or a yearly view of the data. You can pick and choose months and years based on the specifics that you're after. In this case, I make a selection for a fiscal year in a particular month. The definitions are kind of cool because it's pictures and it's colors and it's graphics. And I'm monkey brain, so I like pictures. But as I'm looking at the bottom of the screen, I can see departments: new unit sales, used units, service, parts and accessories, F&I, rental, and maybe I have other departments as well. The green bar is current year revenue. The dark blue is, or I'm sorry, green is last year's revenue, my bad. Purple, or the dark blue, is the current year, so we can make a year-over-year comparison for revenue by department. And if I've got a target for that department, where do we want to be in a perfect world, I can also see what our target is for the month, for the day, for the year, for those respective departments. Well, I can also see the data view, which I like to refer to this as the Cliff Notes version of the profit and loss statement. It is showing you a total dealership breakdown, kind of like your consolidated part of the profit and loss, breakdown by department, so new, used, service, parts, F&I, even rental based on your departments, operating expenses, revenue, target expenses. You can see all the information, much like you would see on your profit and loss statement, just condensed and a little more digestible. But the coolest thing about this is if you're away from the business, maybe you're on the golf course, maybe you're on the boat, maybe you're at the racetrack, and you're wondering, it's a busy Saturday, how's the shop doing today? From your mobile application, you can pull out your mobile app, press the doc report button. Now, this is permission granted, of course, much like the desktop. You see the same reporting data from your tablet or from your cell phone if you're away from the business, or if you're just curious, how are things going? It's directly plugged into your financials, and you can see it from anywhere in the world, and I think that's pretty awesome. So last little report, and I mentioned this is my favorite. This is the customer retention report. And we're going to take a look at it, and then we're going to take action using some of our newer marketing tools that exist inside of Lightspeed. But let's go through the process together. This one lives in System. We're going to come down to Reports, and I'm going to select Customer Retention Report. Now I'm going to make some selections from the dashboard. I want to look at all departments, though I could drill into parts, service, sales, or rental if I want to. And if I'm looking at sales, I could look at my Polaris sales or my Winnebago or my Airstream sales in particular. But for now, we're going to look at everything. I can look at particular customer types, my VIPs, my government, my employee customers. I can pick and choose which customers I want to see, or for our purposes, we're going to do everybody. I can also look at a detail or a summary, and I like to see the detail, so I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm going to sort alphabetically by customer because that just makes the most sense for me. Now, over on the right, I can see my initial purchase date in red and my returning purchase date in blue. Well, let's enter some information in here. And again, not a lot happening in Lightspeed sample data power sports, so I'm putting a pretty broad time frame in here. We're going back to 2017, folks, to start. And we're going to say in the initial purchase date range, which is, let's go back one more year. I think 21's fine. So between 2017 and 2021, show me all the people that bought from me, parts, service, sales, maybe even rental or F&I, that bought from me in that time frame. And of those people that bought from me in that initial time frame, show me the folks that came back and bought from me a second time between 21 and today. I want to see what my returning customer list looks like, my retention, okay? So then I generate the report. Top of the report is going to give me some useful information right off the bat. That red section, that initial purchase range, I can see there were 267 customers that bought from me during that time frame. Yeah, it's good to know. Again, not a lot of transactions. Anyway, in the blue sections, the folks that returned, of those 267, 51 of them came back a second, a third, or a fourth time, which gives me a retention ratio of 19.1%. Now, you might be wondering, is that good, Brian? No, it's not good. You're doing terrible, Brian. You want to be at least 40%. you want to be closer to 80% if you can. And if you're at 100%, you're some sort of a genius. But anywhere between 40 and 80%, you're on track. The closer to 80, the better. If you're at 40, you're doing better than I am at 19%. I'm doing terrible. But what I can do is I can take this information and take action so I can potentially increase my retention ratio with what I'm about to show you next. Now, below that retention ratio, I see where do those folks, those 51 people, spend their money. Well, those 51 people see me a lot. We happen to be using the same customers over and over and over again as why, but nonetheless, I see how much they've spent and how many transactions. I can also see the details. Who are those people and where are they spending their money? How many times? How much money have we made on those individuals? Great information. But in terms of increasing my retention ratio, those people are already coming back, and that's great. I'll take them. But the folks that have not come back, I can see who those people are too. So I know those folks that came in and bought that dune flag from me or had a tune-up but never came back a second time. I know who they are. I don't really know why they didn't come back. Maybe they worked with me and Brian was a jerk to them, or maybe they sold their bike, or maybe they've moved out of state. We don't know. There's a number of criteria reasons why they wouldn't come back. But here's how we can take action. I can press the marketing button on my retention report page, and I can target my non-returning customers. I can target my returning customers, or I can target both of them. And I can say through text, I can also offer a promotion and say, folks, we've got hot dogs next Saturday at the store, free hot dogs, and we're doing 10% off at the parts department. We'd love to see you. So I can send out a campaign and send out 1,000 text messages to my returning customers, my non-returning customers. And if I just get 10% of those non-returners back, well, that's going to take me from 19% potentially and my retention ratio to maybe closer to 40% with just one press of a button. So not only can I see some really great information, but I can also take action and reap the benefits of the actions that I take. More revenue, more profit, a better customer experience for those people as well. Powerful stuff. Now, I know we're a little bit past our scheduled time, so I'll move quickly through the next piece. We're going to go kind of in rapid fire through some other reporting tools worth considering. Now, these kind of fall outside the scope of what you would traditionally call a report. They don't live in the custom reports library. They don't live in the reports library. They're kind of their own little satellites in the Lightspeed universe, but they do provide reporting information. We're going to spend a moment on part invoice analysis. I'm also going to show you a tool called Audit History, which lets you track down the date stamp, the time stamp, and the whodunit stamp regarding different functions in the program, and also introduce you to a tool called Lightspeed Industry Benchmark. So let's take a look at this together inside of Lightspeed. So first of all, your part invoice analysis lives in the parts module, hence part in the title, makes sense. So I'll make that selection and it takes you into a screen, that looks like this one. And at the very top of the screen, I've got a drop-down menu where I can select between a date range, a specific range of dates. In this case, I'm doing 12 months worth of information. Going back to, again, our sample data, not a lot's happening in here. I can choose to include just customers over the counter. I can include internal sales for the service department and sales department, and I can exclude returns if I want to. For today, we're just going to use customer over the counter invoices for our experience, and I gather the data. And as soon as I press that button, it doesn't look like much has happened, but there are some figures at the bottom of the screen that are hinting towards information I'm about to see. Number of invoices cashiered in that time frame, dollars invoiced, number of lines, etc. But let's see what this information actually provides in terms of some graphical value, some actual data, some information. I can see who my best salesperson is across the parts department and how many times do they cashier an invoice, how much have they cashiered. Who's my best customer? How much money have they spent? How many times do they come to see me? And do we offer them a discount sometimes when they do come in? My hourly report lets me see what my slow times of day are, what my busy time of day are, and this might be helpful to make sure that I'm appropriately applying labor to my business. Number of heads on hand to help out with my customers. The daily report, if I'm curious, did we see a spike in business around the holidays? Did we see a spike in business around Thanksgiving? Did that storm that we had impact us? I can see days of the month, number of transactions, and dollars cashiered through my parts department. The day report lets me see what my slow day of the week is. Matter of fact, we're not even open on Sunday. I don't know how we cashiered. This must have been the boss selling parts to his buddy. It's the boss's store. He can do what he wants. We can see that, but we can also see Thursday's our busiest day of the week. We better make sure that our all hands are on deck, that nobody's off that day. Monday might be a good day to give some people time off, those kinds of things. And then the zip code report. And I know as we're trending more and more into an e-commerce space, many of you are using tools like Shopify, you're using Facebook Marketplace, you're using some e-commerce, maybe even on your website. And if you're doing a lot of e-commerce, you get to see, as long as you're entering customer information into the invoices, that is, you get to see which zip codes are spending the most money with you. Do you have mostly locals coming in to see you, or do you have people from out of state, maybe from Utah, coming to do business with you? You're going to be able to see that from this report. Helps you make better marketing and social media decisions, and it really helps to provide some proof in the pudding that your e-commerce system is working. Next thing I'm going to show you, we're going to go into system, and I'm going to come down to audit history. We'll take a look at audit history. Now, audit history is a great place to go if something happened in the system and you want to find out who done it. If you want to do a little detective work, this is a great way to go. So first of all, you'll select the store. If you've got multiple stores in your network that you're reporting off of, you'll select the module. We're going to use accounts payable for today's selection. And I'm going to say the document type that I'm looking for is an AP check. And what I'm asking Lightspeed audit history is, say, during this time frame, during the 1st of September through today, who created an accounts payable check? Because I know we printed one. I'm looking in the check printer. There's a check missing. I want to find out who did it and what it's about. A little bit of detective work. So then I press the find button, and based on the criteria I've selected on audit history, I can see, yeah, it looks like we've done some checks during that time frame. And this crazy kid named Brian Tierney is the culprit. So I better go ask him what's going on. I can see who the checks were created for, the dates, a little bit of context, and if I needed to see something related to that accounts payable check or the invoice, I can click the blue hyperlink, and it gives me a little bit more data about that particular check, including check number. So powerful stuff, great information, a great place to go if you're looking for something that may have happened in the business, and that's going to include your service, your sales department across the business. It's the whodunit search. Now, the last thing I'm going to speak to is our Lightspeed industry benchmarks. Another solution that lives inside the Lightspeed system and actually lives across the different departments. So I can access this from service. I can access it also from system. Either way, when I make that selection, it takes me into a series of check boxes where I can check what sort of information do I want to look for, and then I run the report. And what it's going to give me is it's going to give me a report card on how I'm doing as a business in relation to other stores in my industry or across the nation. Lightspeed Industry Benchmarks is a reporting feature that's built right into our system that allows dealerships to compare their performance metrics, KPIs, that's aggregated against other dealerships in the same industry, that you can make some comparisons and really see how your business is performing in relation to others. Provides benchmark insights such as sales, service, parts, and financial KPIs, so that dealers can see how they stack up to their peers. And it helps to identify areas for improvement and make data-driven decisions. Some of those areas might be repair event cycle time. We've got reports that'll show you that. What sort of margins are you making on the part sales that you have to major units? Your F&I penetration. Lots of great information can be gleaned from Lightspeed Industry Benchmarks. One thing to note is it does require a license. It does have a price tag attached to it. So if you're using it, great. If you're not, if you're considering it, it's a great solution for managing your business and also allowing it to make business-driven decisions based on national averages and how you compare to other dealerships. But with that in mind, I'm also going to show you on our lightspeeddms.com website. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up on the screen. You can access some of this information for free anytime. This is updated on a monthly basis. So if you go to lightspeeddms.com, you go to resources, and then you go to Lightspeed data services. This is where some of those KPIs, some of those comparative analysis are showing up and available for everybody to review. Things like repair event cycle time across power sports, marine, and RV for Lightspeed dealerships. Comparative analysis across the different industries. You can download any of these reports and just review them right there on your monitor and just kind of see what the data shows. And it's a free solution that's available to all of our Lightspeed dealers. In fact, it's available to anybody who's interested in seeing this information. It's powerful information, taking some of those bits and bytes and little pieces of data and giving you actual information to make decisions about your business. So just to kind of take us home, I know we've gone a bit past our time today, and I certainly appreciate everybody's time and attention and for being here with me on Wednesday webinars. We talked about reporting types in Lightspeed. We really kind of focused on the two main types, but we also showed you some other elements in the Lightspeed world that contribute to the reporting experience. Talked a little bit about reporting navigation and design. We talked about Tierney's top 5, and I hope you found some value to that, and I hope you'll employ those in your dealership today as well. Just the last thing I'll mention is you can follow Lightspeed on 3 different social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We're creating new content every single day, some meaningful stuff, some really powerful stuff. We'd love to have you along for the ride. We also have a YouTube channel where all of our webinars, promotional information, a lot of great stuff has happened on our YouTube channel, and of course our website. We welcome you there anytime. And if you have some questions or if you'd like to talk to our customer support team or our sales department, please reach out. We've got people standing by ready to talk to you. And with all of that, I'm going to pause for a moment and take any
Take a breath.
questions that might have come in. Yeah, take a breath.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. We'll let Brian maybe even get a gulp of water there, whatever. Thank you. So much great information. And like Brian said, appreciate all you guys hanging in here and asking some great questions. I know Quinton's been looking at those and answering a few as we go, but as you guys probably know, that anytime we have reporting questions, it's super customizable. And so don't feel put off if we're like, contact tech support, because it really is your best outlet to really get that customized, exactly what you need type of report. But with that, Quinton, I know there were some broader questions too. So maybe you want to just bring up a few of those and address those as well.
Yeah, definitely. There were some really great questions that came through this time. One question that I think will be really simple to answer and maybe show Brian is just how totaling works on custom reports, how you can make subtotals and totals show up on different places on the document. It's pretty simple once you get in there.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
know
absolutely.
it's a great one to show, because I think probably every time we talk about reports, somebody asks that question, because we say it's simple, but it's probably not that intuitive until you've seen it or done it one time. And then I think you will find it fairly easy to do.
Yeah, pretty easy. So when we're thinking about totals, we're thinking about numerical values, financial dollars values, we're thinking of on-hand values, maybe available values. So those columns by default will have a subtotal checkbox and a grand total checkbox just by default. Now you can customize some of these fields. That might be a subject for another day. But if I simply check the box to subtotal, check the box to grand total, when I run the report, if I've got things broken out by category or by supplier, I'm going to see subtotals at all of those breaks and ultimately a grand total at the bottom. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, it's pretty intuitive, pretty straightforward, but certainly a question we get often. Absolutely.
Definitely. Yep. Awesome. Well, the next one that I think is really worth addressing and is a really good question, and one that comes through tech support all the time. You might be looking at one report and another report that they seem very similar. And yet when you run both of them, there's a discrepancy between them and you're wondering, hey, what's going on? These seem to be almost the exact same report. Now, this happens quite often, right, Brian? Like people have this question a lot.
Yeah.
From my time that I spent in support, rarely is it ever that simple when it comes to these types of questions. I answered one of them very simply in the chat, just saying, they're probably looking at very similar but different data sets. Now, we had an answer to one of them for the parts invoice analysis versus your P&L for parts from Brian Lucas, which I think he might be a partner from TAG, if I remember
The account
correctly.
guys. Yep. So thank you, Brian,
Yep.
for answering that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Now you can see if you read through that answer in the Q&A, hardly simple at all. These are, very complex things that go into the totaling of these reports. So even though, these things are looking at similar items, it can be very complex what comes out the other end. So definitely if you have questions about those details, it might take someone with a lot of tech support experience to answer those types of questions, and they're a lot more complex than you'd anticipate. So yeah, you have anything to add to that, Brian?
The one thing that I've found oftentimes when it comes to custom report design is, and this is probably, I don't know if it's a fault of ours, but it's a, we'll call it a feature. Sometimes learning terminology and vernacular is something when it comes to software, whether it's Lightspeed or anything, we might use a different phrase than the dealer used for something. And it's possible that we use the same phrase for multiple things. But that same phrase may not always result in the same bit of data, right? So I can't think of an example off the top of my head because I'm under pressure here, but there are times when you're searching for, let's say, a widget, and widget might mean two different things based on where you're pulling the information. And it goes back to, I think, what Quinton said. First of all, experience, having gone through that before and doing a little bit of checks and balance, or reaching out to somebody who already knows the answer. those are sometimes challenges that I've come across just with vernaculars.
Yeah. And I would say too,
Yeah.
having talked to a lot of dealers is like, get in and try it. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about a customizable report is like, you're not breaking the system reports, you're creating your own, you're not going to ruin anything for anybody else at the dealership. So you
This is
can
true.
get in there and try it and test it. And that's one thing that's, I think, is a wonderful feature in Lightspeed is like, you can create probably almost anything you want, but it does take some time and learning.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. Get
You
your
know,
hands dirty. Get in there and play
Yep,
with it a little bit.
exactly. One other thing too, Brian, is like a couple people love the doc report, but they're just saying this is one like my report is blank, and I think I've heard that before, and they're going maybe it's because they're non-departmentalized, like their data and their information. But I'm also going, I think we've ran into like where maybe they just didn't have access to it. I don't know if there's different things you've ran into.
Could be one of those two things. Permissions. It could be departmentalization doesn't quite line up. But if that's the case, I would encourage you to reach out to customer support and have them take a look at it with you.
Yep.
Yep. Definitely.
I don't know if there was other ones, Quinton, that you think are addressable, like to a broad group. Again, so many things, great questions out there, but many of them are very specific to that particular report that someone wants to create.
Yeah. So, a lot of these questions, a lot of them are asking about customizability of system reports, and there's unfortunately not a whole lot we can do there with reports like the top selling parts or the technician statistics report. Sometimes you can play around with custom reports and get something close, but it's very, very difficult to do, and you will spend hours toiling at that sometimes. Usually the best way to get those addressed, get anything where you want to add something to a system report, I would encourage you to go to the idea exchange inside of our client portal. Put in a suggestion there. Those are looked at. Those are tracked by our product team. Please feel free to submit those and we'll take a look. And, I can definitely see the value in a lot of these suggestions that have been had in the Q&A for those system reports.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Anything else in there? I think it's covered a lot. I know there's a lot of information today. So again, thank you, Brian. Thank you everybody for your time and attention. I'm hanging in here, and hopefully you've picked up a number of tips and pointers for how you can really leverage the Lightspeed in reporting and all the data that we provide as part of your dealership system.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate you being here, Diana and Quinton, and thank you folks for joining us again for another Wednesday webinar. We look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.